Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to my deep guide, and today we are checking out the Kindle Scribe Gen 3 Colorsoft, although technically speaking this is Gen 1 of the Kindle Color Scribe, although it's coming out with the Gen 3, so it's a big spaghetti monster, right? You've read all of the reviews, you've read all of that kind of stuff, and what have you seen? You have seen that this is the best color representation ever, that Kindle has solved colors and all of that kind of stuff. And in my first impressions video, I have invited you guys to do a blind test and between 4 separate devices. The whole goal of this were 2 questions. First one is, which one of the 4 devices do you think Kindle Scribe Gen 3 Colorsoft is? And the second question is, which image did you like the best? And I promised that I would reveal the results of this blind test in the in-depth review, so here it is. Which were the devices that we were competing with? Well, it's going in this order. Device number 1 was Book's Note Air 5C. Device number 2 was Penstar eNote Pro Color. Device number 3 was the Kindle Scribe Gen 3 Colorsoft. And device number 4 was Book's Tab X. So those are the 4 devices that you were actually looking at. It's important to note that the Book's devices were configured to be neutral, right? So I've taken off all of the filtering and all the crap that Books does normally, and I just gave it like, okay, neutral. Kindle was set to contrast at 2, and eNote Pro was also set to neutral type of rendering, so that it's like as equal base and least amount of post-processing as I could make the devices do. And I have to say that I'm incredibly proud of my really sophisticated audience, because although technically majority didn't vote that Kindle Color Scribe is the Color Scribe, at the moment of making this video, it's currently kind of close between the Colorsoft and the device 2, which is the eNote Pro Color. So majority of you thought that the eNote Pro Color was the Kindle Colorsoft, but the answer to the second question is interesting, which was, which image quality did you like the best? And majority of you, at the time of making this video, it's still very close, but the majority of you has voted for the Kindle Colorsoft, that you liked that image quality the best. So those are the findings that are currently now when I'm recording this video, but in the editing phase I will add the final results that I have at that time, and then I'll schedule the video and you'll see what's what. So we'll see how it's there, but basically these 2 are kind of fighting against each other, and for me I think it was a very, very interesting and informative type of approach here, and it might be something that I could kind of introduce later on as well in some other videos as well, because I think it's quite illuminating. So, Kindle Color Scribe in a nutshell. In my opinion, does it solve e-ink colors? No, it doesn't, because it's using Kaleido 3 panel, which inherently has a lot of flaws. What are those flaws? Well, it's much more ghostier than regular panels. It has that CFA layer on top, which affects a multitude of things, and most important of which is the darkness. This is a much, much darker panel than a regular monochromatic screen, and in the case of Colorsoft, it's actually darker than other Kindle 3 or other Kaleido 3 devices as well. So generally speaking, this is a rather dark device. CFA layer affects the fuzziness and the sharpness and clarity of the image as well. And some people can actually react negatively to the uniformity of the CFA layer that's kind of on top of everything that you look at. So light that's coming to illuminate the content has to pass through that CFA layer, then the light emitted from the electrophoretic cells in the display itself, they also have to go through that same CFA layer, so you have quite a lot of filtering going up and down. The other effect of this being a much darker panel means that you will need to use that front light a lot, like almost in all types of situations you will need to use that front light, except in absolute best lighting conditions, which has those two sides to it as well. The first side is, the good thing is, excellent front light, really excellent front light on this device. The bad side is that you need to pump it up to quite a bit of intensity, and it's going to have a very negative and very real negative effect on your expected battery life. And the third thing is that Kindle Color even with the front light off, it consumes way more battery, even not just the Gen 1 and Gen 2, but even more than its black and white Gen 3 counterpart. It's less battery efficient. So one of the traditional strong points of any Kindle device was near infinite battery life. That is not longer going to be the case with the Colorsoft. Those are things that are kind of problematic, but what about the image quality itself? It's very nice. It renders colors in a really nice way, and if you match the color content that you're looking at with good lighting conditions, it does manage to mimic paper in a good way. They've done the calibration really well, and this is an example where maybe you could get a similar thing out of books if you spent, I don't know how much time tweaking the settings and figuring things out and maybe saving a preset and having it close that. Probably you would be able to get there. But the whole point is that with the Kindle Colorsoft, you don't have to do anything. You absolutely have to lower the default contrast, which is set to 3, which is absurd. It makes it super dark, like unusably dark. Set it to 2, and then it's going to be much better. It does also have the vivid option, Colors Vivid, but that's so exploding and so overblown that I don't find it usable for anything other than genuinely extremely limited and pale colors that you want to boost up for some reason. So as a reader, it really is very pleasant to read. But here's the thing, it costs well over $600, and if you kit it out with the folio and things like that, you may be approaching $700, and if you then have import tax, then it's going to be like $800. For that, I'm sorry, no, it's not worth it. It's simply not worth it, because you do have alternatives, as we've seen from the blind test. Yes, it is maybe something that you favor marginally over much cheaper devices. I mean, the eNote Pro Color has proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that a much cheaper device is capable of producing same or better, in many situations, better results than the Colorsoft. But hey, it's not a Kindle, it's not Amazon. It doesn't have that huge PR behind it, and granted, it's not as well balanced of a device as Kindle Colorsoft is. Now the balance part is important here because it actually works as a reader and as a writer, because it has lower surface to screen distance, has really good writing latency, it's a little bit faster than the previous generation, so it's really good and really fast, feels good, and it writes good. Although that good writing feel is kind of packed in this super limited platform of, again, Kindle, and that either works for you or it doesn't. It's totally up to you, because you only know what works for you and your own personal needs. And that writing performance, while it's really nice and fast, the writing feel for some reason feels more slippery than it does on a Gen 2, like it did on a black and white. That's a kind of weird thing. And then you pair it with the new pen, which isn't as good as the new pen. It's shorter than the new pen. Well, that might be a thing that you like or not. The new material is way more slippery. It's now perfectly round, and it doesn't have this flat section here, which was super nice because you could just feel it with your fingertips where the orientation is and where that button is. You no longer have that. And it's no longer just like that. It was also for attaching it to your device. It was really easy. You know where the flat side is, you tap it there. This is no longer the case. I always fumble around with the pen. It's like, oh, it's here, it's there, until it finally oriented somehow, and then it attaches to the device. It's not a big deal, but it's a regression. It's not as good as this one. One genuine improvement with the new pen is that eraser on the top. This one is hard plastic. On the new one, it's a much softer material and it generally feels like an eraser when you're erasing on the screen. So that's a really nice thing. But everything else about the pen, including pressure sensitivity calibration, is actually a regression to what is the Kindle Scribe Gen 1, Gen 2 premium pen, which has been my absolute favorite and daily driver for the past several years. The design of the device is really nice, as I've already talked in the first impressions. I really like the redesign. It feels, you know, very nice and exclusive and modern and kind of cool to hold in your hand and interact with. I love the nice edges. Unlike with the black and white, we have darker edges, so it doesn't really accentuate the darkness of the Kaleido screen. And I think that the 11-inch size is an excellent pairing for both reading and writing. So that aspect of the Kindle Scribe is really good. And I wish that more devices would actually start going with the 11-inch size. We've already had like a couple of devices going into the 10.7 inch, and going to 11-inch just makes even more sense. And it's starting to make that 10.3-inch standard feel a little bit more cramped. So those are the things that I feel are genuinely good about the Colorsoft. But again and again, I keep going back to two aspects, and that's like, one is subjective, one is objective. The subjective one is it's a Kindle platform. It's either going to work for you or it's not. For me, it doesn't. Okay, let's kill that one. But then we have, well, I can't show the finger that I already shown because otherwise it would be a rude gesture, and that's not my intention. But the other aspect, or this one, focus, goddammit. The other aspect is the price. No matter what I do, I just can't justify that price. It's a nice device, but way overpriced, and it definitely has flaws. So with that in mind, let's check out the DAF analysis, display analysis framework that I've developed like a year and a half ago. I've been testing it now for a year and a half over more than 30 devices, quite a lot of data points collected in a highly controlled environment. And now I've been tightening it up, recalibrating the DAF analysis to get even better results out of it and more meaningful results out of it, so that we can see how do these devices perform and how do they compare to other devices, not just themselves in isolation. And let's start with the readability for the display analysis framework. And the Colorsoft here at standard fonts, 100% of blackness, it's performing really well, which is to be expected because it's 300 ppi and it is an 11-inch screen, and larger the screen, larger the fonts are rendered, better the readability. And that is directly reflected here. In spite of the CFA layer, which you can clearly see how much it can affect the different types of content. So if we're talking about 16-point fonts size, it's not that big to interfere too dramatically, but even when we step down to 10-point fonts, which is more standard type of thing, you can actually see that it's starting to eat away at the edges here of everything. So even though technically speaking, underneath that CFA layer, the content is being rendered really nicely, it doesn't really matter because it's going to get jagged up by that CFA layer on top of it. And that becomes increasingly more evident the smaller the content is and smaller the fonts are. So at 6-point, we can actually see it drop down even further. But the screen is rendering so well underneath that CFA layer that it's actually able to go through it even in, you know, the little dot I here at 6-point, which is really good to see. Stepping down at 70%, it's remaining fairly clear and uniform. And stepping down to 50% of blackness, yes, the readability remains quite strong and good. Moving on to thin fonts at 100% blackness, we can see that Colorsoft is remaining really strong performance and excellent sharpness here on the larger fonts. Of course, stepping down, it becomes a little bit more of a battle with that CFA layer, and we're starting to see some losing of the cohesion here, so we can see only 7 is rendered black. The rest of them are going into this kind of grayish thing, and the scaling of the pixels is simply not done properly. So it doesn't know where to hit the 100% pixel that it's kind of black, and then it goes into this kind of grayish kind of thing. And when we step down to 50% of the thin fonts, well, yeah, the larger fonts are good, but the smallest fonts are starting to suffer, but they're still kind of legible. But now with the interference of the CFA layer, it's starting to become a little bit more tricky to kind of see all of that. When we check out the thick fonts, this is where traditionally Kaleido devices will struggle a little bit, simply because that's why the test is here. On the larger fonts, it's fine, but when you have thick fonts at 100% blackness, there's going to be a bleed around the edges. And when you introduce the CFA layer jaggedness on top of that bleed as well, it's going to kind of start appearing blurry. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So hopefully when we step down to 50%, yes, it becomes a little bit more legible and readable. So overall, an okay performance for a Kaleido 3 panel. But the readability of a Kaleido panel can never be actually truly compared to a true monochromatic panel, and that's unfortunately what we see here on the Colorsoft as well. Contrast and uniformity is quite good. It's very impressive how it handles the black color here. So we have excellent, average, and poor lighting conditions here, rendering of a pure white color and a pure black color. And of course, Kaleido panels are going to struggle with this test when they are not aided by a front light, and this is with the front light off. And we can see that generally speaking, the whiteness performance is really poor at 0.34. We're talking about half of what normally you can expect from these devices, because other devices score at around 0.7 in these instances. But that means that the blackness is rendered really nicely. So you do get a good perception of contrast effectively. But if you're looking for brighter content, yeah, you're not gonna be kind of getting that. However, when we start introducing the front light, here it is at 50%, it's not really going to be able to lift things up in excellent lighting conditions, because it's still really low type of intensity, but it does significantly help, especially the poor lighting conditions, because you can see that they're becoming a little bit more equalized between poor and average lighting conditions. So the front light becomes basically a necessity on the Colorsoft. And when we bump it up all the way to 100%, we can see that it definitely starts to have an impact on the rendering of white color, even in excellent lighting conditions, which just talks about just how dark that panel actually is. Very dark panel indeed, but that front light doing a lot of heavy lifting, it's a mandatory type of thing. Thankfully, it's a good one, but it's also going to affect your battery life expectations as well. Reflectivity is really good on the on the Colorsoft. We can see that it diffuses the edge itself very nicely, but unlike Remarkable Pure, it controls that diffusion, so it doesn't start going whoosh all over the place, but we have eliminated the edge and then diffuse it in a relatively controlled manner around the point of, or the source of the reflection. This is a really good type of behavior. Overall, good performance of reflectivity here on the Kindle Scribe. Color accuracy is quite nice and consistent on the Colorsoft. So we have overall good scores on all three colors here, especially with the green, because green can very often fall under the 0.4 type of value here. This is not the case. So yes, good performance from Colorsoft, and the red as well. Blue is normally a strong point for a Kaleido panel. It's not a problem at all. The green is the difficult one, and the red is also kind of a point of struggle. So it's good to see all three colors performing roughly equally as far as accuracy goes. So it's a well-balanced type of calibration of the screen. When we put the front light to 50%, let's see, it's helping out equalize things a little bit more. So we're ever so slightly affecting the blue to go a little bit down. Red goes a little bit more accurate. Green roughly exactly at the same place. And when we get to 100%, then we have even more equalization of the accuracy of the colors between here, because we now have 45 or 46, 45, and 41 for the blue, red, and green colors. So overall, good performance with the color accuracy rendering. Surface roughness is an interesting one here because my personal impression was that it was really, really smooth. And, you know, at 0.362, you can't really characterize that as paper-like because, you know, devices like Note Max, for example, that's 0.6 something. Remarkable 1 and Remarkable Pure and Paper Pro, they're like at 1.2. And you have like the Epic category like Quaderno, for example, that's like at 2, and Paper is at 2 point something roughness, just so that you know like where we're talking about. So 0.36, it's really, really smooth. But if I'm not mistaken, I think that the original Gen 1 and Gen 2 were even lower than that. We'll see afterwards when we compare all of them. But for some reason, it actually felt more glassy, more kind of slippery. And I think that the reason is that the density and simply the profile of the surface roughness. And as you can see, the density here is so high that basically the pen tip is not going to be able to feel any of these irregularities at all. So it's pointless to have this type of or degree of irregularity. So while the roughness is there, it's not the type of roughness that's going to be caught by the tip of the pen. And I believe that that's the reason why this one actually feels smoother than the Kindle Scribe 1. Writing latency on the Colorsoft is excellent, really, really excellent. So I think that we're having that the old Scribe was at around 14-ish milliseconds, and that we're starting to have like 12 and a half, or it averages, it varies a little bit, but it's really, really nice characters. You can see fairly consistent, and it just looks really, really good. So overall, it's very fast and fairly consistent. Surface to screen distance has been quite a bit improved on the Kindle Colorsoft. Now, any of you who follow the results of DAF for any length of time will know to expect around 1 millimeter of screen to surface distance for devices that have upfront light. And Colorsoft scores at 0.95. So generally speaking, you're like, oh, just 0.5. It's not that much lower. Yeah, true, but it is under 1 millimeter. As we can clearly see, the tip is going just about under. But the important context here is that Kindle Scribe 1 and Kindle Scribe Gen 2 had very unusually high at 1.55 surface to screen distance. So if we're comparing going from 1 to 95 other devices, that's not a big thing. But if we're talking about older Kindle Scribe 155 down to 0.95, that is a big difference. One of the impressions that I've gotten while testing Colorsoft was just how quick it is at refreshing pages, and that's really interesting to see that, yeah, it's consistently so at sub 200 milliseconds for a full page cleanup, so page full of content down to an empty page in 189 milliseconds, roughly thereabout. That's a really, really good value to actually see, and an excellent performer, because for comparison's sake, one of the recent devices that I've also reviewed is the Remarkable Pure, and that one is at 404 milliseconds. And even as such, it was outperforming the old Remarkable 2 and things like that. So this is a really, really quick performance on the Colorsoft for refresh time. Unfortunately, that speed does come at a cost, and we do get some remnants and okay ghosting performance, but not really that great. Again, it comes with the Kaleido 3 category. There's only so much you can do with the Kaleido 3 panel. They are fairly ghosty in their nature. So we do see that kind of carry over both in text, graphics, and combined. So while not catastrophic, but not great ghosting performance either. Front light intensity calibration is a nice curve, so it's fairly usable. So we have quite a bit of a usable range here between 10% and 30%, 0 to 4 lux. Then we between 30 and 50%, 4 to 25 lux. And then it starts to ramp up. So 50 to 75%, we go to 98 lux, and then at 100, it really jumps up to 370 lux. So that's a very, very high value, but that does mean that your intensity is probably going to be hovering between 50 and 75% for comfortable use of this device because of its inherent darkness of the display. But yeah, the curve is there and it allows you to use it the way you want. And it's a good thing to see that there's quite a bit of a control here between 0 and 4 lux for complete darkness. And the color is actually a little bit too intense. I'll need to readjust my ranges because I thought that 6,500 was going to be enough, but obviously not, because here we have 6,860 for, I need to flip these too as well, for cold light. So it's very, very cold, and 3,127 Kelvin for warm light here. Mix at around 4,400. So whenever you have mix 50% of warm and cold light to be around 4,500 kelvins, that's a nice value. That's a very, very pleasant value to kind of have. And the intensity doesn't change too dramatically. So obviously in warm light, remember these two need to be flipped. So in warm, we will have a little bit less intensity. In blue light, we're going to have a little bit more, but we don't have a huge curve variation here, just a small kind of a bow here on the edges. And the battery life is around 50 hours without front light of continuous reading, 33.3 hours with the front light at 50%, and down to 7 hours at 100%, which makes sense because you've seen that curve, just how big of a jump it is between 50% and 100%. So that front light is going to consume a lot more closer you get to those 100%. And we have the same thing kind of reflected down here in the writing test with 16.67 hours of continuous writing per charge without the front light, down to 11.1 at 50% front light, down to 5.55 with the front light at full. Right, so now let's see how does the Kindle Scribe Colorsoft compare to the old Gen 2 black and white Kindle Scribe, and how does it compare to the new black and white front-lit Kindle Scribe as well. Starting with readability, we can see that the Kaleido 3 panels simply cannot compete with pure monochromatic panels. And unfortunately, it's across the board. It's not a competition at all. Similar story will continue in the contrast and uniformity. However, in Kaleido 3 panels, because of that CFA layers, they are maybe cheating, maybe not. I haven't really decided yet, because uniformity carries 30% of the final score for the contrast and uniformity. So we have contrast 70%, uniformity 30%. And here the uniformity is really, really dominant over the monochromatic devices. Why? Because CFA layer is an artificially created uniform layer on top of any imperfections and irregularities that you may see between electrophoretic cells, which is what is measured here in the Kindle Gen 2 and Gen 3. However, that CFA layer on top hides that. Now, why am I saying is it a cheat or not? Well, it's cheating because it's hiding it, but it's not cheating because you as an end user won't see it either. So that's why I choose to actually leave these here, because I think that they are a meaningful representation of uniformity, of perception of uniformity that you will actually see. Not lab stuff or anything like that, but what you will actually be able to perceive as an end user. So, with that in mind, the uniformity of Colorsoft is much, much higher than the Kindle Gen 2 and 3 because it's a Kaleido panel. But we can see again, because it's a Kaleido panel, the native contrast is again, same as with readability, way, way down when compared to Gen 2 and Gen 3 monochromatic Kindle Scribes. color accuracy, here it is in isolation. I'll do a separate video at some point to kind of compare it with other devices as well. Here it's just Kindle and Scribe family. So as the only Color Scribe device, this is how it scores. It's not really that meaningful, but when we move to reflectivity, we can actually see that it is edging out the black and white color Gen 3 Kindle, which is interesting to see. Though they have a very, very similar type of characteristic here, it does edge it out in both sharpness and intensity, and therefore in the final score as well. These differences are not huge at all, so it's the same character, very, very similar type of scoring, but it is a little bit better. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the ghosting performance, where, again, because it's a Kaleido 3 panel, it's the inherent nature of the panel itself. It's going to be very ghosty, and that's basically what transfers here. And Colorsoft scores much, much lower than even the Gen 2 monochromatic Kindle that's now a couple of years old. Surface roughness, there we go. So that's what I was talking about. The original Kindle Scribe Gen 2 had smoother surface. Definitely, measurably so. And we can see that the new ones are very similar, although, yeah, Colorsoft is a little bit more kind of jaggedy, but these differences are very, very small. So it depends, you know, which area of the screen are you going to be measuring, for that whole kind of distance. But this is a huge jump in surface roughness between the old Kindle Scribe and the new Kindle Scribe generation. However, I'm just left with the impression that it feels more smooth. Maybe it's just me, maybe it's the new pen, I don't know, but it just feels a little bit more slippery than the old one for whatever reason. Refresh time is interesting because we can see that it actually wins over all three of these, even the black and white counterpart that is released now as well. So yeah, not all Kindle Scribe Gen 3s are alike. And Colorsoft, blistering refresh time performance. Writing latency, well, yes, it's a little bit faster than the old Gen 2, but not as fast as that new black and white front lit device. So that's kind of interesting to see. But still really, really quick at average of 12.93 milliseconds. Surface distance, this is what I was talking about. So we had like 1.55 on the Gen 2 from 2.5-ish years ago, and we down to 0.95. So all of that work that they've done for improving the stack has paid off, but unfortunately only when you look at it, you know, in regards to the old Kindle Scribe devices, because every other, or almost every other front-lit device is hovering at around that 1 millimeter mark. So effectively what that means is that Kindle Scribe is now finally having, a standard type of surface to screen distance. And battery life, well, that's a bad picture. There's no other way to characterize it. This is really, really bad, even with the front light off, when compared to both the black and white Gen 3 and especially Gen 2. We can see that the new generation of devices is simply not on par as far as reading goes. When we're talking about writing, well, they're pretty much equal here, which makes sense. Without the front light, they're all going to be pretty much the same, which is really good. But as soon as you start engaging that front light, because it needs to do a lot of heavy lifting, we have a significant drop-off here as well when compared to both of the other Kindle Scribes. And you need to remember one thing: unlike the black and white Kindles on the Colorsoft, you will absolutely have to use that front light much, much more often and of a much higher intensity than the other devices, because it's so much darker, and that directly is going to eat into its already limited and diminished battery life. So what does that mean for the final DAF results? How do they compare? Let's see. Well, there we go. So Colorsoft, even though it's a little bit, orange to bananas comparison, because it's a color device, but compared to the other Kindle Scribes, it outperforms the Gen 2, but it does not outperform overall as a device the new black and white front lit Gen 3. And if we go as an e-reader, we can see the similar story continuing here, actually dropping just a little bit behind the old Gen 2, as an e-notebook, it will be more because it's faster, it has much better refresh rate, and yeah, things of that sort. And as an e-tablet, in an e-tablet category, you get a bonus if you have colors. And then that bonus is then scaled between how good those color performance is. And Kindle Scribe Colorsoft performs really well with the colors themselves, but even that is not enough to actually pull it ahead of its predecessors. And there you go. So that's the Kindle Color Scribe Gen 3, Gen 1, depending on how you want to call it. Is it a device that I can recommend? If you have a lot of money and you really don't know what to do with it, and you're okay, you belong to the Kindle Scribe Kindle family, that's something that you really like, and you don't mind that it's a much darker device, you don't mind that the ghosting is much worse, you don't mind that the battery time is much worse, and you don't mind that it's Amazon implementing AI features to collect all of that data and train their AI models with, well then yes, then it's a device that would make sense. So if the comic books that you're reading are so important to you that you're willing to forego all of these things and kind of overlook them, then great. But I would implore you to explore your options, because there are other options out there. So please try to resist the hype and resist the FOMO. Is Kindle Scribe Colorsoft a good device? Yes, it is. Does it render good color images? Yes, it does. Is it something that's irreplaceable and absolutely the best thing on the market? No, it's not. Is it worth the asking price? Absolutely no, it's not. Hopefully this video helps you kind of make up your mind where you stand about this device, and do let me know in the comments down below what your opinion is. Are you a Kindle Scribe Colorsoft user? Are you a Kindle user? What is your opinion about Kindle and Amazon going via the AI route that's going to be collecting users' data and using it for trading, which they've been doing for a long time now, but also now for AI training as well? Especially when we're considering that Kindles are being used by parents all around the world to actually, as a safe thing to give to your child to read or share a reading experience with your child. Introducing AI into that type of context is something that gives me heebie-jeebies. So I would like to kind of hear a little bit more about where you're coming from, especially if you are a Kindle Scribe parent user using a Kindle device with your child. Is that something that you're even aware of? And is that something that you give any thought? And is it a point of consideration for you or not? Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found the video informative and or interesting. If you did, please like, subscribe, and ding the notification bell in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!